Hello, welcome to the Forest School podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're talking to Ruth from the Lost Giants. We talked to Ruth about loads of things, about the giants that they make, the beasties that they make, and all things. And we get to the end of the episode. I'm not going to spoil it. There's so many good things inside. When we get to the end of the episode, you might hear that it sounds a little bit cut off, and that's because it was cut off, the perils of technology. But thankfully, we are talking to Ruth again in a couple of days' time. So there's going to be a part 2 to this episode. I'm so excited. I've got so much more to talk to Ruth about. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you to everybody that's supporting us on Patreon. Thank you to everybody that is checking out all the stuff on social media. We will see you at the end. Bye. Welcome to the Forest School podcast, a show where I, Lewis, and my co-host, Wem Southerner, set out to explore a shared pedagogy. It's a space where cerebral thinking matters more than craptivities, where educational purpose outweighs pretty resources, and where inclusion is more than just a buzzword. Join us as we overthink the trivial, deep dive into whatever sparks our dopamine, and reflect on what it means to truly hold space for others, holistically and without judgment. Thanks for being here. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I dislike when you fiddle with BluTAC and then it gets hot. Hot BluTAC is not the one.
No, it's the best, I think.
No, hot BluTAC
like
is
cold?
Not the one.
Oh, okay. Hi, listeners. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are here today with Ruth Webb, and I have met Ruth through Morris dancing, but I reckon there's like several Venn diagrams, right? I kind of want to talk about this on this topic of like Morris dancing or like folk involvement, art, and forest school and nature connection and lots of other things on top of that. But that's how I've met you, Ruth. But you've been involved in loads of really interesting stuff recently and in your career. And I really wanted to have you on, and also inspired by the recent Dartmoor adventures of the access and all of that stuff. So Ruth, you're a forest school practitioner, and would you describe yourself as an artist and an activist as well? How would you kind of sum up like your career and what you're up to?
Oh goodness, I always really struggle to describe myself. Yes, I'm a relatively recently trained forest school leader, so that's been the last sort of 4 or 5 years of my life. And that came to me, or I came to it, or whichever way we met, because I had been working in theatre as a designer, outdoor theatre, for a really long time. So that was my holding space. I was like, yes, I'm an outdoor theatre designer. And now I'm slightly more complicated because I'm kind of that. I'm also a forest school leader. And I've also worked in collaboration with my sister-in-law, which is delightful. And we make giants or folk beasties. And this is for activism and also for general sort of arts and community projects. And so I guess maybe if I had to give myself a title, I could be a community arts and activism, but very specifically around giants and procession. Those are my main joys in life. So yeah,
amazing. Yeah, and so
title?
you're giant making. Yeah, I mean, giant maker extraordinaire as well, maybe. Like, so your group, your partnership with your sister-in-law, that's the Lost Giants. Is that right? Lost Giant Makers?
That's right. Sorry, I should have said that. Yeah, we are the Lost Giants or the Lost Giant Makers, so that you can find us on Instagram. Somebody already had the Lost Giants.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're actually a basketball or something like that in America. But anyway, so not them. They won't help you with processions.
Not basketball. Yeah. Tell us a bit about. Yeah, tell us a bit about giants and processions, and specifically giants, like because I was a complete stranger to this until I think probably I went to Sidmouth, and it was St. George's Day, and saw and it's like, yeah, the Sidmouth Giants are out, and it's like, sorry, what is going on? So especially for people who have not been in the presence of a giant. Can you tell us a bit about giants and processions?
Yeah. So my I'll try and give you a real potted history of why we call them giants as well, because that's quite interesting. But essentially, giants have been used in processions, and I think you know, when we say processions, I think we also mean sort of people taking over the streets, which in itself is quite a political act sometimes, even if it's not overtly so. And they've been used sort of either for villages or towns, or for specific, Morris groups or things like that, for absolutely years. I mean, there's no history that's sort of written that has a particular date, but the oldest giant that lives in the UK is the Salisbury giant, and off the top of my head, he's somewhere in the middle of the 15th century, and you can still go and see his original giant head in I think it's in the Rural Museum in the museum in Salisbury. So there is a long history, but then this history, as with lots of other parts of our lives, was very much disrupted, and I think we lost a lot of our giants, and probably, well, we definitely lost our masks. Can't find a hide nor hair of them in our histories or museums. And we lost a lot of our traditions. And then I'm not exact, but the 80s, basically, late 70s, 80s, there was a lot of work done on making cultural connections to Europe. And that brought giants back to the UK, because we had these cultural exchanges. A massive one was in Birmingham, and that was with the Spanish giants, but there were also smaller ones. And basically, people from either France or Spain brought over giants and processed them around, and the folk musicians sort of created events around them. And my parents were there, and I was there as a small child at these events. And that kind of created this resurgence of giant building in the UK. And I think we're probably in a bit of a secondary one now. So we're now in the children of the people who were very inspired by these creations that were brought over. I feel like I've missed a part of your question, but that's my
No, not at all.
But
That's so
basically,
interesting. The
basically,
bit
my
about like
parents were
stuff coming
giants.
together though is
Sorry.
like, that thing that's like because to make one of these big giants, for the procession, you have to have like multiple people coming together. And you're saying about that thing about like taking over the streets is is an act of whatever level of activism you want that to be. But there's something very representative about like people coming together and then that being represented by a very big figure, which is kind of symbolic both to the people who have been involved and to the people who maybe haven't been involved. And it's like, hey, look at what these people might do. They are a force to be considered. And like there's something there, I think, that's very enticing about giants. And but also I can understand why, like you said about things being disrupted, why the people who maybe weren't involved in making those giants were like, we need to get rid of those because those are not good for our status quo, you know?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, who knows exactly how these things happened, but giants are an amazing symbol. And I think the wondrous thing about them is, just because they're bigger, we relate to them differently. We project ourselves onto them. And obviously throughout history and folkloric history, there are giants that inhabit our world in multiple different ways. And some of them are very unpleasant. We also use giants to represent natural disasters, to represent oppression. So there's those sides of the giants, but then there is this side of the giants which is oh, hang on, apparently I've got a performance issue alert. Just press fix now. And the giants in Europe, especially in Belgium, they're used almost totemically, so, or as a motto almost. So each village will have somebody that could be a representation of somebody from their history. It could be a representation of somebody that they admire, and they will take their giants out onto the streets. They have like these huge giant meetups where all of the different villages come and bring their giants to the streets, and they go and do a big procession. And it's sort of, there's a pride there in the sense that you have your being that's yours and you sort of take it with you, and it has a certain feeling or motto that goes alongside it. So, like, there's something in the giant which is both we get to project and feel bigger because of its presence. We are enlarged. And there's also something in the fact that it's not a clear message, unlike a banner. So if we're moving into sort of the more of the political actions, unlike a banner, which generally says a sentence upon it, something like a giant allows everybody to project onto it some sort of symbol or meaning, and be that light or be that in the truly sort of absolutely mystical sense, they still hold that power for us. And then you've got that added extra layer of, if it is created by you, if it is created in your community, then you've literally put you've put your material, you've put your hands onto that work. And there's just something about physicalizing things, isn't there? It's a process that you go through. You meet, you talk, you physicalize something, and through that, multiple meanings are found. And I think, I imagine if you talk to people who have, created a giant and processed with it, they'll probably have some real commonalities, but they'll probably have some really specific things that it means to them. And I think that's a lovely thing, where nothing's black and white. It's just a sea of color.
I love that. And the communal act of making is, as that process is so important, and it's storytelling. Can you tell us a bit about beasts as well? Because you made an amazing beast. You've made lots of beasts, I'm sure, but the Rewilderbeest, or the Rewilderbeest. Can you tell us a little bit about him or them?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. He is a he, actually. He's sort of turned into a he, rather strangely. But anyway, at the moment he is a he. But he is called the Rewilderbeest, and he is based around these beings called the Hodden horses, which would have been present across the UK as far as we know, but are mainly now in Kent, Sussex kind of area. So it took me a really, really long time. I've been wanting to make a Hodden horse for years, and I felt like, oh no, I'm working with somebody else's tradition. And I did quite a lot of like talking to the Morris people and people that have done wonderful academic studies. And the word on the street was, it's okay. They were all over the UK. Alongside what we also now know as Mary Lloyds, which are the horse's skull. They were also present across the UK as well. So, you want to be careful with people's traditions. But anyway, we now feel like that was okay. So basically, the Rewilderbeest is like a meeting place in between. We're utilizing this beautiful folk tradition. I have carved him very much in the style. So his head is made out of wood, spalted beech, for those who are interested, because it was really nice and light. And the thing that changed him from being a Hodden horse that accompanies a Morris side or other street sort of theatrics is that I wanted to add in a message, or not necessarily a message, but an invitation, actually, an invitation for conversation around how us humans and the rest of the natural world are actually sort of one. And the reason that the Rewilderbeest can have that conversation is because we've used materials like rushes gathered from Somerset, really lovely sheep's wool that we gathered up on Dartmoor, rushes from farmers' fields. We've included corn grass, so that was gathered off of Dartmoor, so that's the purple moor grass. And its antlers, it has antlers, which isn't very traditional, and they are made from burnt bracken, not bracken, sorry, burnt gorse. So within all of those materials, and we hope to be continuing and adding more, there are conversations that are to be had around how us humans are managing land and the materials that grow upon it, or the plants, depending on what you're doing with them. They turn into materials as soon as you cut them. It's an interesting thing. But anyway, the Rewilderbeest's mission is to engage people in conversation around the natural world, but with a specific sort of lean into how our intersection with it, how we utilize it, can also be done in a way that conserves or rewilds. And so it's an attempt at bringing together folklore and self-rewilding, because also we're not used to being in masks. And with him, we've created masks for other people to wear, and they've all gone and had a wild experience with him. So he's kind of a meeting place in between self-rewilding, folklore traditions, and ideas around how we can live more sustainably and still get to utilize the wonderful materials that are growing around us to create beautiful and useful objects.
And it's a really, I've seen, I haven't met him in person, but I've seen videos of you out with him, and the interactions with people when he's out and about. And I can't remember specifically what was happening, but you were talking with the people around about plants, and he was kind of communicating in his voiceless way about the plants and things. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Oh yes, he has olfactory plant identification, because
Okay, yeah.
actually, I'll tell you all a secret. The person that's normally inside of the Rewilderbeest is actually an excellent botanist called Jim Penny. So, because the being of Jim Penny occasionally chooses to turn into the being of the Rewilderbeest, then the Rewilderbeest has developed this amazing ability. And it's a really playful way of getting children engaged in which plants the Rewilderbeest is looking at, which plants the Rewilderbeest may like to eat, which plants the Rewilderbeest wants to just sort of smell and investigate and are too precious for picking. So we play a lot of like really gentle, very easy little games that in the end get children to know which leaf they are picking. So just the other day we were standing and I was like, okay, which plant, is there plenty of around here that's not going to mind 20 children picking a leaf? Okay, it's that willow tree. So I say, go and pick a willow tree. I don't point at the willow leaf. I don't point at the willow leaf. And gradually they'll be, oh, yeah, okay, that one kid knew it. Okay, great. We'll go and pick some. And I'll keep on just really simple being like, oh, it loves willow. Oh my goodness, that bit of willow is so tasty. And it's just a tiny, tiny little thing to do, but you're just repeating the name, attaching it to a plant, and then reinforcing its like wonder for the Rewilderbeest.
Yeah.
And because the
Yeah.
Rewilderbeest loves and enjoys it so much, you kind of get the sense that the children are also sort of gaining some of that joy from that interaction. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I love that it's not just adult to child going, we're going to identify. You could even play a really playful game, couldn't you? Which would still be fun, but the additional element of the Rewilderbeest being there, like it's that kind of kinship and care we feel for animals that is like an extra layer of special, isn't it? It's not a real animal, but it's got that animal quality, and that you're doing something nice for the animal, even though it's a puppet pretend animal. I love that.
Yeah, it has, just so that people can imagine this properly. It has a clacking mouth, so they have a clacking mouth that opens, so it makes a really lovely visceral noise, and it can kind of go open its mouth, and you can feed something in it. It'll go yum, So
Yeah.
yeah, I think you're really right, actually. I hadn't quite worded it like that before, but I think because it's another creature that we understand is a human being, but we also, if we're up for a bit of magic, we accept it as the Rewilderbeest. And it's lovely, the children's eyes will go in between the Rewilderbeest eyes, which are quite a lot above its head, and then they will flick down. And some of the children do need to know that they're not being duped. It's okay, there is a person inside, but you can watch them. And for some children, they're much more fascinated by the fact that there's somebody inside, but most of them will eventually stop trying to look at the person's eyes, and they're just right up there, and it doesn't matter. They brought into it, and yes, it wants
Yeah.
clover, and I now know what clover is, and I'm going to go and pick it loads of clover. Yeah.
That's really interesting. That kind of reminds me of when I went at one of the Forest School national conferences. I went and did a little workshop on puppet making, and it was much more. It was puppet making as I initially would think of puppet making. Hand puppets and finger puppets and little things like this. And I can remember walking away feeling quite. It was a difficult space to have. It wasn't a space in which you could have like a debate or a conversation. And when like a workshop leader says something and you're like, oh, that doesn't resonate with me, but I've just got to kind of eat this for now. And they were talking about the fact that they had this, I think it was maybe it was either a badger or a hedgehog or something. And they were doing that thing where they put their hand in one side of a wicker basket and out the other side so that the thing was moving. And and we have puppets like that in the woods, and somebody asked in this workshop, we said, oh, do you ever let the children have a go with this badger or rabbit or whatever it was? And the workshop leader was like, no, I think that completely spoils the magic. I put it away, and I don't let the children like ever see it
Mm.
deflated, or they don't ever see it. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I think there's in my head, this is all going on, I'm going, no, hard disagree. I think there's a huge benefit to, like you were saying about putting masks on, and like that experience of like, oh, who's got theory of mind, who can put a thing on their hand and pretend to not know what this puppet knows, or who can like experiment in a social setting because they've got this mask of a puppet that lets them be a little bit rude or be a little bit more cautious than they might be, and so how do you feel about that thing of, are they constantly alive? How reverent do we take these masks and puppets?
It's such an interesting space. So there's one really clear thing that we've definitely chosen not to use the word puppets. And it's interesting because a lot of people
Okay.
use the word puppets for what we would term giants. My reason for calling them giants is just because that's what we always called them, and because somebody is inside of it, literally inside of it, rather than controlling it from the outside. But I think also because instantaneously, as soon as you stop using the word puppet, we have a greater opportunity to attach to it in a way that's not human led. So although we know it's the same, just literally by not using the word a puppet, we've kind of instantaneously given it more of its own beingness. So that's one point. And then, yeah, it's been really interesting because there isn't a right or a wrong within this for certain. It is absolutely wonderful that we get to watch performance. And performance is generally done by professionals, and that may not be on a stage, but it's still definitely very held, and you wouldn't get to see the bones of it. You wouldn't get to see a puppet without the hand inside. You wouldn't get to see somebody putting on the giant. But probably because of, and I realize I didn't quite answer your question here, Wem, but like what we are calling these beings, like the Rewilderbeest, we're calling them folk beasties. And the fact that we're working within a tradition which actually comes quite a lot from Morris and guising traditions, which have, happened on the streets, are generally amateur, and they have less rules in them, in the sense that it's okay to see something not being operated, to just have it casually being there. It's okay to invite people to be inside of it. We've had amazing times with Crocken, who I'm sure we will get to, where literally it's like, who out of the crowd wants to come and inhabit this being,
Wow.
So I think the folk tradition allowed us to break that, that third wall, or whatever they call it. So there's that element. And I think the reason why we're so interested in working in that realm is there is enough spectacle in the world. And there is some really good spectacle out there. I mean, my goodness, if you want to watch spectacle, it's there. But unless you're a maker, that's really out of your reach. And we're so used to everything being handed to us now. And this is going to be, I'm going to try and make this rant short, but like, think about cartoons, think about dolls and the beings that children get to play with. They're amazing. There's very little for them to project their imagination onto. So we culturally are very used to spectacle being something that's over there. We are the witnesses. We applaud in the right place. We are wowed. And the things that are being made and the cartoons and everything, they're so amazingly realistic, and you absolutely don't have to do much work to buy into them, which is wonderful. But it's sort of left this space where you have maybe community arts where sometimes the making level is very low, and it's just lovely and well done, and we all made a lovely thing, and the community was really the point of it. But we're trying to hit this middle ground where there's still something really beautiful, but it's somehow obtainable. And you might be able to go away after seeing one of our giants out and about and be like, oh, I think I know how they made that. And I think we could do that with our community. And so, yeah, I think there's truth to all of these things. Absolutely, it's magical to just watch a being come to life and to absolutely believe that that's it. That's the only state you'll ever see it. But it's also wonderful to occasionally break that and to be like, yeah, and here it is. And do you want to see the inside? It's just a backpack with some bamboo. You could totally do this. I love showing
I was gonna
their
say,
inside.
like, for people that see your puppets and not puppets, people that see the giants and beasties and want to. I get there. Want to. They've got these things. These lovely. I'm holding them up now. People are seeing them on the zine. They've got these cool zines, which for people that are just listening, these are these like very punk, very DIY kind of things. I'll move it around, right, for copyright reasons. Look, right. So it's like how to make.
Oh, no. You're fine. You can hold it up. Don't worry.
There you go. So Ruth has got these incredible zines that you can, and it's got these really beautiful, descriptions. But what I really love about it is, even this is a little bit amorphous about how to do it or what you could do, and very kind of in an empowering way. Lots of it is whatever you've got, whatever shape's going to work for your thing. Have a go at that thing, which I think is very, empowering is the word, and I think that's a really interesting thing to hear you say about hitting that kind of like low making skill, high community value, versus spectacle. And that's something that I've definitely found, because I most recently saw Crocken, who's the big Dartmoor giant, and then came away and was like, we need one in the woods. That the community that I run needs one. And actually, since then, I don't know what it's been now, maybe a month since then, more and more sort of unpeeling of like that thing where I go, actually, the community bit is higher than, because I was like, oh, we've got 8 weeks in this half term. We could definitely like progress it, and it could be like this, and step one will be this. And then as soon as it went off that kind of Gantt chart timeline, I went, actually, do you know what? I don't need to do this anymore. Maybe we don't have one this year. Maybe it's more about playing with the paper mache. It's going to be a month of paper mache play. That's what we're doing this month, and it's not going to be, incredible. But that's something that we're so privileged to be able to do in the setting that we have as forest school leaders and as outdoor leaders, as opposed to someone who might be in like a school. If you're going towards the school play that happens at the end of the summer half term, you've got a deadline. You've got parents that are coming in. The spectacle bit of it is higher on the priorities list. And I think we've all had that thing, especially people that have, like me, that have been teachers, where you go, I want the kids to be involved in all the state. They've gone now, and I'm going to finish like 80% of it. Fuck. And so it's been really nice to unpeel that and be like, nope, the priorities here are the community bit of it. This is so process focused rather than product focused, and that is embraced in these zines is really supportive, I think.
Oh, good. I'm overjoyed that they're being helpful for you. We wanted to include so much more, but we only had a little space. So, yeah, I hope they can help you create. I'm sure you will all, sure you will find your giant when it's ready to emerge.
Absolutely. Can we talk for a little bit then? We've mentioned Crocken a few times already, but maybe now's the time to talk about them. Who is Crocken, for people that have just heard this word like 3 or 4 times?
Oh, old Crocken. Okay, so old Crocken is a Dartmoor protector legend, although apparently they come in many guises. The story that we worked with was captured quite late. It was a Victorian story, and Crocken's a funny one. They're not like. They're on neither side. They are the land. That's how I understand them. And so they are a protector of themselves or the land, whichever way you decide to look at it. And for the Right to Roam campaign, Stars Are for Everyone, which was a campaign around being able to camp in the wilds of Dartmoor, which was a right that was under threat and has now we can all relax for the next however many years in the world. We now have that right to camp on Dartmoor. And yes, so Crocken, we used the tail of Crocken because it had this wonderful sort of symbiosis really with what was happening at the moment. Basically, the story is this landowner comes down, decides that he wants to make all this land's just lying around being pretty useless. He can drain it, he can make it fertile. And this old man has a dream that he tells to the man from out of town. And he says, basically, old Crocken's like really not happy with you. And he's got a message, which is, if you scratch my back, I will rip out your pockets. And the wealthy landowner, he continued with his work, and he drained his pockets. His monies went into Dartmoor, and Dartmoor would not cooperate with being productive, fertile land. I wonder why. And so Crocken ripped out his pockets. So he was a wonderful, wonderful metaphor, because there was another wealthy landowner who was attempting to stop wild camping, and he was literally ploughing his money into this venture. And so, oh my goodness, so much work was going on with Dartmoor National Parks and the Dartmoor Preservation Association, amongst so many other entities, and essentially. The right was eventually won. It went through the courts 3 times, and eventually a bit of magic happened where the right person read the piece of paper and said, yeah, that's what it says on the piece of paper. That's how I see it. Just had to get the right person at the Supreme Court to read that piece of paper. But Crocken was there for us throughout that as this sort of totemic being that we got to, one, create as a community, and two, sort of, have as our either fearsome or joyful totemic head. So yeah, once again, the Crocken can move in either dimension. Would you like to hear a bit about how Crocken was created? Because that's
Yes, please. I was going to ask that. Yes.
Yeah. So this was all of the sort of brainchild of Lewis Winks and Guy Shrubsole and Emma Linford, who had been doing, and many others who I'm sorry, I can't name everybody, but they would dreamt up this being and put out a post onto the Right to Roam group and said, does anyone know how to build giants? We think that we'd like to have old Crocken. And I was just like, yes, me. And so me and Lewis Winks started this amazing sort of long multi-formous conversation in which we talked about a lot of things that we talked about today, actually, in terms of what having something that the community has created and something, a being that's bigger. And we decided that what we would do is we would have a 2-day making for everybody. We held it in Totnes, and it was kind of sign in, drop and drop in. So we had sort of different levels of engagement, which is a really nice way to run a project. It was open to all ages. I think I had a making restriction of I couldn't hold under 5s, basically, because that's a whole nother set of hands that are needed for that one, and my hands were too busy. But yeah, we had a whole cross section of community, and the other lovely thing was we gathered all of the materials. So we had this spreadsheet, and I just put in, we need green fabric, we need lots of different colors, we need this, we need that, bamboo, everything. And the community had a holding place where they brought all of their stuff to. And so when I walked into this room and we were like, right, we're going to create Crocken, I literally didn't know the material that was inside of the bags.
Oh, wow.
And it were just like going through these bags, going like, okay, which one's going to be Crocken's cloak? And eventually we found Carol's mum's hand-dyed curtains. And Carol's mother had recently passed away. And it was just this like beautiful moment where we held it up and everyone was like, oh, that's Crocken's cloak. And Carol was just like, oh my God, they were my mum's curtains. It was just so beautiful. It was so beautiful and meaningful for her, and then for everybody else to know the story of the material. And we sort of sat and ripped. And that, oh, this is a lovely tip, because you did ask me whether I had any tips.
Yeah.
So the beauty of making Crocken was we did try and do all of it all at once, which I'm not sure I would totally advise, but we had all of these different levels, and one of the levels was just sitting, snipping a bit of material and ripping it. And this is accessible for everybody pretty much, even the younger people, they could rip it with their parents. And having something really like low level, repetitive, but fun, because you're still making choices, you're still finding out about materials, some won't rip. So there's loads that you can engage with, but you just get to sit and talk. And for the community the community of that campaign to be able to just sit and spin stories and talk about their, how they relate to Dartmoor, whatever they were talking about, having that happen in the room at the same time as people who were really thinking through, logistics of how we can get the structure built whilst making artistic decisions. That was wonderful, because it means you can engage with people on whatever level of things that they can bring. And we also had people making food in the room. So, okay, if the creative part was like not your thing, you can make the soup and the sandwiches, you know. So that was a really, really lovely moment of being able to, truly work with all that were willing to go into it. I think I've missed out loads of bits I could have said, but that's good enough.
No, that's great. That's a very good tip. I was going to ask this a random question. What about storage?
Oh
So
God.
because for those of us who might be listening to this going, because I have created giants in my head, right? Just since the beginning of this chat. I'm like, right, my village needs to create 2 giants and we're going to process them on these days. I've decided everything, right? But then I was like, literally the one thing holding this back is like, okay, you've made this wondrous thing and it's so precious because it is so representative of all these people's time and energy and imagination. How and where are you going to store this wondrous thing so that it stands the test of time and is there for processions in the future? What are your tips about that?
Okay, so I think any village hall that has a roof space, we need to campaign for them to open this up for giant storage. I do have a few giants stored in a few village halls. This has been a really, really wonderful connection to have made to places, and if people do have the space, they'll be really, they've been really, really supportive. So that's my first tip. If you can get your village or community hall to help you out, that's the way forward. The next part is the bit that we're very, very keen on, which is that your giant should be able to flat pack as much as possible, which is why we're very, very stuck on this hoops. So what we have hoops that are generally willow and they're hung down with strings, and you can create pretty interesting shapes with this. Obviously there's some things you can't do because you're relying on gravity and you're hanging, but essentially even if you have something that is, you know, quite big, we've got a 30 foot ish giant, so giant that can see into the second floor windows.
Holy
Even
shit.
here, if you, Jolly Bob, which I'd love to tell you about, but we probably won't have enough time. Even he, you stack them all down. It's still got the cloth on top of it, and it's still large, but only in one dimension. The more 3-dimensional parts you make for your giant, the harder it's going to be. So storage-wise, so head 3 dimensions, backpack, that's pretty, that it will fit around things, pretty 3-dimensional. But if you can make the rest, the big voluminous part of the body, if you can make that flat pack, then that will help with storage for sure.
That's a great
so
tip.
asking, so I guess the next bit after storage is maybe this conversation about, we've talked about the community side and the making side and the something of putting yourself in, I think you used the word physicalize, which I really like. How do you have thoughts about, obviously if you stored a giant in an absolutely perfect way and then it came out again the following year, if it's like a yearly procession thing, do you have things that you build in to bring new people into that tradition so that it doesn't become something that was made 15 years ago and nobody here's got any physicality in it anymore? How do we keep bringing people into that making side once we've got a giant?
Yeah, I absolutely. We have that situation in my hometown, which is where we first started making giants. And what we have done with that is the giants are finished, but they always need a bit of tending to. So most giants don't like to be stored. They get a bit uppity about that. But what we've done is we've run workshops alongside of it, or not even run workshops, just held an open making space for people to just come in and make, so that then they are making smaller processional items to go alongside. So I think that's the way to just keep that life cycle going, because you're right. But also I think people love the fact, it's a funny one, isn't it? People love to be involved, but they also love the fact that the thing is the same. We are creatures of habit. We're like, oh, here they are, our giant. So I think people also love a bit of familiarity. It goes a long way. Helping us all feel like the world's not changing all the time. Doesn't
Yeah,
have to be new to
absolutely.
be wonderful.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about if you are working in this way with communities and you're going to make a giant, how do you go about the process of, because you were describing the places in Europe and they've all got their giant, which kind of represents a motto or their individual pride of that place. How have you kind of begun with, obviously the story you told of old Crocken, that was a really amazing metaphor and story that really worked for that particular giant. But when you've done it in communities and towns, where have you got inspiration for who the giant is going to be and what it's going to represent? How's that journey gone?
Oh yeah, that's a really interesting one. So in the Southwest, we're pretty blessed with folk stories that you can find that even if they're not in your village or town, they will be near enough to you. And it doesn't matter whether you know about them or not. It that in itself is actually wonderful. If people don't know about them, you get to bring them a story that's from their land. So yeah, in the
Yeah.
Southwest, we've had a lot of success by finding just even snippets of stories. It doesn't even have to be a full story, just a mention of somebody, or a being that exists, and then we've created a visual version of that, quite often in cooperation with either children or adults. So we'll get them to do lots of designs, and then we'll find commonalities between them. We'll be like, oh, everyone's drawn it hairy. It's definitely hairy, or
Okay,
20 people have
yeah.
drawn it hairy. Okay, it's hairy. That's, group decision stuff. So
Yeah.
that's a really easy way in some ways, because you've already got some material to work from. In other situations, like we built this Jolly Bob. We built Jolly Bob, it with Plymouth Barbican Theatre, which works a lot with youth, and we decided, okay, what is, I mean, the Barbican Theatre is right on the Hoe front. So who's the obvious person here? You've kind of just got to go for obvious. It's a fisherman, of course it is. And so we picked a fisherman because that's a really large part of the history of Plymouth. And so you in most places will have something or somebody that has an obvious importance to that area, and you've just got to work sensitively with the people that you're working with, check in with them a lot about what it means to them, whether this is
Yeah.
something meaningful, or whether we're going off in the wrong direction. But I guess having been a theatre designer for a long time, one of the skills there is to research and to you know read the temperature of where we're at with physicalizing stories,
Yeah.
and in which way we want to manifest those stories. So yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned getting people to draw something. Is that part of the workshopping before you start the making? You kind of hold an
Yeah.
event to invite people to share their
Yeah, I mean, the making,
imagination.
it happens, projects happen differently. Every single project happens differently, but this is one of the methodologies that we've used, much more with shorter projects, and working with schools and less sort of established community groups. So I haven't tried it in a really established community group that's already in existence. But yeah, essentially we play the exquisite corpse game. That's one of them, where you get the head drawn by one person and the body drawn by the next person, or we use like printing blocks so that you take out, so they're just sort of designs, and people, that means you, oh no.
Did it go all clunky for you?
Yeah.
Ah.
Okay, so as you can hear, obviously the technology's got in the way, but like I said, we are doing another episode with Ruth. We are doing a part 2. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this part, and we will see you next time. Bye, stay wonky.